Hello, welcome back to the latest We Are Sunderland briefing with myself, Dom Shaw, Scott Wilson, in association with our partners, as ever, the Fans Museum and Cospex Opticians. And we are recording this on Wednesday afternoon. And I guarantee you, even if we watch it 20 minutes after we finished, if you watch it 20 minutes after finish recording, that it's probably going to be out of date because it's been that sort of summer so far, Scott, and that sort of week. Go down and make a brew, come back up, and you've missed a transfer exclusive.
It's been that kind of week, hasn't it? I mean, this is Roy Keane deadline day territory this week, isn't it? Where it's just like, when are the signings going to stop? Yeah, incredible stuff. And obviously, we joke about kind of previous Sunderland signing splurges, but this one feels so different because it's names from right across the continent. It's players that kind of other clubs have been in for. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating to see how this plays out. But when we spoke to Christian Speakman, he said they were going to be decisive. He said they were going to be bold. He said that they were going to stick to what they've been doing. This was going to be a major squad overhaul. Well, we're seeing all of that come to fruition and then some, aren't we?
So just to recap, Habib Diarra done. He signed on Tuesday for a record-breaking fee. Reinildo, the Atletico Madrid fullback, left-back, or former Atletico Madrid left-back, he announced his departure there earlier this week. He's going to be through the door by the end of the week. And now Noah Sadiki is the latest, the next through. That deal has been agreed between Sunderland and Union Saint-Gilloise. He's currently undergoing his medical in Paris Wednesday afternoon as we speak. So providing there are no last-minute issues there, that one.
Do you think they've just booked a hospital wing in Paris? And they're like, well, we might as well make the most of it. We've got it for a week.
Just a load of young, athletic, talented footballers in a queue outside.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Get the next one in. I mean, we'll get to Diarra. We have talked about him previously, but we'll get to Diarra. But let's talk Sadiki first because it's fresh and new. Yeah. He won the title in Belgium last year. I'll just read something that I'd read on The Athletic before we started here. He joined Union Saint-Gilloise in 2023 for a cut price, 1.3 million euros. His growth since then has been remarkable. Last season, he was one of the tenets of RUSG's first league title win in 90 years and was deservedly named in the division's Team of the Year. As a way of describing him, it's difficult to find a direct comparison. His balance of skills is unusual. He's a sturdy, dependable ball winner, but an artisan in possession with a cultured passing range. He's one of those number 8s without a fixed label, whose different attributes become more prominent depending on how relevant they are within a specific part of a game. He can play in various midfield roles. He can play at centre-half. He can play at right-back. Versatility is clearly one big box that Regis Labrie wants to tick, but from the outside looking in, just very, very early, given that it broke in the last half an hour, it looks like another real catch for Sunderland, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hugely exciting. Has established very quickly a really big reputation in Belgium. Now, you can say, okay, it's Belgium, it's the Jubilee League, but Union Saint-Gilloise created history by winning that league last year, did it in style. And he's clearly been a big function of that. Now, what I think is interesting with this deal probably is, we'll get on to Diarra in a moment, but Diarra, kind of box-to-box attacking midfielder, in many ways a fairly direct replacement for Bellingham. I know that's an easy comparison to make. The money's about the same, but it feels like that's almost replacing a player who's gone. This signing, Sadiki, feels very much like plugging a gap that really has been there throughout Regis Labrisse's reign, but he's made a pretty good job of covering in the Championship. So on a number of these vids last season, certainly towards the early part of last season, we were talking, weren't we, about how Sunderland didn't really have a natural defensive midfielder. What they did have, it turned out, of course, was Dan Neil, who was moulded into largely a defensive midfielder. There were games last season when Neil played a bit further forward. There were some games when he was given license to push on and be that more progressive midfield player that he had been earlier in his Sunderland career. But for a big chunk of last season, Dan Neil's main role was as the defensive shield, kind of mopping up, holding things together, preventing counter-attacks in front of the back four. My reading of this, in many ways, is that while Dan Neil excelled at that in the Championship, is he going to be able to perform that role in the Premier League? Not is Dan Neil good enough for the Premier League, because I think we've all seen enough in Dan Neil to know that he's a player who all things being equal, looks like he can handle Premier League football. But against the very, very top side, I mean, Manchester City fell apart because they didn't have a proper defensive midfielder once Rodri got injured this season. Was it realistic for Sunderland to think that Dan Neil, for the whole of the season, could perform that role? I think Regis Lebris decided pretty early on it probably wasn't. And so this type of player has been one Sunderland have been really looking for this season. When we spoke to Christian Speakman, he made a point of saying the spine of the side is going to be so important. We need a strong spine. I think this is a big, big part of that, in that what Sadiki will bring from everything that you read about him is a real defensive mindset, a resilience, an energy in a deep lying midfield position that will help Sunderland when they come up against some of the best attacks in world football.
And what's interesting is when we did our first kind of transfer video of the summer, and we were talking about the areas Sunderland want to strengthen, kind of initially we were talking about, right, where are the areas where Sunderland look weak, that they're going to want a centre forward, they're going to want another winger. What's become absolutely apparent in recent weeks is nobody's place is safe in the team, and they're willing to strengthen all over the pitch. If they believe they can sign a left back who is going to strengthen their ranks, then they're going to do it, even though they've got Dennis Sirkin there. Goalkeeper with Anthony Patterson. There's no way we'd have said at the start of the summer that Sunderland are going to be spending £20-odd million on a goalkeeper. But it's become pretty clear that they want to take this opportunity to ensure they have the depth and the competition and the cover throughout the pitch, isn't it?
They're looking all over the pitch, but I think what's going to be telling is where the real money is going to go. And I come back to this, is right down the middle of the team. Goalkeeper, I think there'll be a centre half. We look like now we've got two central midfielders. We know there's going to be a striker or some form of a forward. I think fullbacks in the wide positions, yes, there's a desire to strengthen in and around that. Reinildo obviously is coming in. But on a free. Now, that's not to say that there won't be a significant outlay, because if you're signing a player who's been in Atletico Madrid, his wages are clearly going to be considerable. But I think the real bulk of the spending, what we're seeing already now, is it's down that spine of the side. That's where they feel they need to be strong. And then the more you can add in and around that, the better. But the real focus, I think it's becoming, pretty obvious now. Goalkeeper, probably a centre half, two midfielders, a forward, right down the middle of the team.
And the other thing, and I'm conscious of the fact that this is kind of reported interest and speculation, but Diarra was very much in demand. Sadiki has been linked with Leeds, Brentford, Brighton, and various other clubs. Now, some of those might well not have been firmly in for him. They might have had a look, but might not have been in for him. But then there are those as well who will have been. Sunderland are clearly being very successful very early on at being able to sell their vision and sell their exciting plans and sell a move to these players who aren't short of options.
I think there's two things here. One is exactly that you've said. Sunderland is now an appealing destination for particularly kind of young players looking to make that move into English football, into the Premier League. Sunderland is a massively attractive destination for lots of reasons. The narrative that's being built up around the club, clearly the reputation that Regis Lebris has got on the continent. I think probably that Gazolfi, the Florent Gazolfi, the incoming sporting director, technical director, whatever he's going to be called. I mean, we're led to understand that his fingerprints are very much over a lot of these deals. I think he's clearly already an influential figure in all of this. And the fact, obviously, that Sunderland give young players a chance. You're going to Sunderland, you're going to be playing, you're going to be there, you're going to be right in amongst it. So that's one. The other thing that I think Sunderland need an awful lot of credit for is the speed with which they've been able to wrap up these deals. Like, how many transfers have we been writing about at other clubs this summer and that you've been reading all across the Premier? I mean, Brian Mbeumo's been going to be moving for the last 2 months. And yet Sunderland are wrapping up these deals really quickly. Deal agreed, medical done, personal terms already sorted. It's not quite scarf above the head, is it? Because we didn't see that with Diarra, but it's the next best thing.
Well, he did. It was just outside the entrance doors, or it would be outside the entrance doors.
Of Paris Hospital, exactly. Yeah. But that that is real credit to Sunderland for that, I think, because there's been times in the past where the accusation's been labelled at various Sunderland regimes that they just cannot get transfers sorted. It's taken forever. They can't act quickly. They can't outwit other teams, really. Well, that's exactly what they've been doing here. They've got their targets. They've negotiated, one would presume, hard, but seemingly very quickly. And they've got the deals over the line. Now, time will tell how these players settle, whether Sunderland's valuation of these players is correct, because certainly in the case of Diarra, I think they paid a lot more than certainly Leeds felt that he was worth. Now, in many ways, okay, do that, get the deal done. If he's a player you want, pay the money and do it. But only time will tell whether Sunderland's valuation of these players turns out to be correct. But if nothing else, they've acted decisively on clearly what have been some of their leading targets, and they've got them in at an early stage of the summer, which is what we've talked about, would be a real positive if they could do that moving into the Premier League. Give Labris a chance to work with them in pre-season, to get to know them, all of that stuff. Well, that's going to happen with at least, by the sounds of it, 3 or 4.
And what's particularly impressive about that is the fact that Sunderland didn't know what division they were going to be playing in until May, whatever. So although they had their plans in place, Labris confirmed, didn't he, that they had 2 lists. You can't really set about negotiating hard to sign Habib Diarra when you don't know whether you're going to be in the Premier League or not. So
no, that's exactly it. Which like you say, it's
playing catch up.
Yeah, it's even more a pat on the back for the way that they've been able to do this. And like I say, it surely can only be positive that they're getting this done so early in the summer to get these players in place. I mean, firstly, it sends out a signal of what Sunderland are now about for anyone else they're going to negotiate with further down the line later this summer. We all know the ambition of Sunderland now. It's there. It's clear to see. And like I say, you've obviously got the chance to work with these players now as well and actually bed them in. It's going to be some. Well, actually, it probably won't be because they're internationals. They won't be there. But it's going to be someday at Gateshead and South Shields, isn't it?
Oh, it'll be fascinating to see where it all plays out there. The famous double header. The players are back on Friday. Diarra's not going to be. He's been given an extended break. Clearly, Reinildo isn't done yet. Sadiki isn't done yet. So we don't know when they're going to join up. But for the players who are already there, the Sunderland first teamers from last year, you're going to come back, I would imagine, thinking that you've got to catch the eye pretty quickly and impress pretty quickly, because just circling back to a point I made earlier, no one's place appears to be safe in the team. You're going to be conscious now of the fact that there are going to be players coming in several areas, and you need to make sure you start where you left off last season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, there is a core of the team that got Sunderland up that is still going to be very important and play a lot of football this season. I don't doubt that. We're not going to see 11 completely new faces in the starting lineup for that first game against West Ham. But you're absolutely right. I don't think as we sit here now, you can categorically state that anyone will definitely be in that team for the first game of the season. Who were the most important players for Sunderland last season? Patterson, O'Neill, Trey Hume, Dan Neil, Wilson or Eliza Mayenda. Would you say any of them are nailed on to start? Maybe Hume. Maybe, because there doesn't seem to be a lot of talk about a right back, and as things stand, you would think he's pretty nailed. But probably apart from that, I wouldn't. And even with Hume, I wouldn't like to think I'm a mortgage on anyone. It feels very, very much like a state of massive flux, and there's an awful lot that's going to come out in the wash in pre-season.
The goalkeeper then. So Bulker's heading to Saudi Arabia, where I'd imagine he's going to be earning more in a second than we earn in our lifetime from all of the suggestions.
What first attracted you to the £160,000 a week paying Saudi Arabian side Neom FC?
With Saudi Arabian top flight newcomers, Neom FC.
Yeah.
Jordi Petrovic, I think I've pronounced that one right.
Yes.
Sorry,
Chelsea on loan at Strasbourg last season.
Yeah, it was on loan at Strasbourg.
There's growing talk around that, doesn't there? It's certainly in the last 24, 48 hours, which would tally because that kind of marries up with the time frame when it became obvious to Sunderland that Bulker wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, so watch this space on that one. And then, as you mentioned earlier, centre forward. Centre forward is clearly the priority area. And where do you start really with the various names that Sunderland have been linked with in the last week? There, we won't go through them all because the chances are there's going to be new ones, and some of them will be speculation, some of them will be concrete. But what we know is Sunderland are still very much assessing several options and in talks with several different clubs and representatives when it comes to strength.
I think they've spent the last few days sounding out exactly what clubs want for the players that they're kind of interested in. And that's why, there's been talk of an actual bid for a Aberdeen. There's been talk of bids going on into Dynamo Kiev. I think in reality, what it actually is Sunderland saying, okay, what is your actual valuation of this player? Because at the minute, we value him at X. You're valuing him at Y. How far apart is that? Is there actual room for negotiating there? That's my read, and that's what I'm kind of hearing on where Sunderland are at with the strikers, because that and the goalkeeper feel like the two other areas where big money is going to be spent reasonably soon. But as I say, I think with strikers, Whereas you get the impression with Diarra and Sadiki that while there will have been some degree of negotiation over fee, I suspect that the starting point of where Sunderland were at and where the two players' respective clubs are at wasn't a million miles apart. I get the impression with two or three of the strikers that Sunderland have been looking at, they are a million miles apart. And it's do Sunderland get drawn into a lengthy kind of negotiating bidding process when actually that gap might never be bridged, or do they start looking elsewhere?
And we've talked a lot about incomings, understandably, because so much has been going on. But in terms of outgoings, Nathan Bishop went to AFC Wimbledon, which I know is very much a fringe figure, in an expected move. But there is going to be an exodus. There has to be an exodus of fringe players this summer. So just look at those who are coming back from loan moves or would be due to come back from loan moves this summer. Pierre Ekwa, Abdullah Bar, Nazari Rusin, Hamia, Adil Al-Shish. That's just a start. Nectar Triantis, we know there's loads of interest. Then there's players... then there's players who were on the fringes last year who were never going to break into Labrisa's plans. Joe Anderson, for example. Then there are others like Jensen Seals who have been part of it, but were on the fringes. Leo Yelder. If someone continues to strengthen, would they benefit?
Alan Brown probably falls into that category.
Yeah, loan move away. So clearly Sunderland are going to want to take care of priority business first, which is strengthening in several areas. But there is going to come a stage where there's going to be an exodus of these types of players, isn't there?
Well, there's got to be a massive exodus of those types of players, and it's how many leave permanently, how many does Sunderland have to just ship out on loan, how much money can Sunderland claw back from those players, most of whom were signed for, little, €1 million or less, certainly, some were frees, but that some cost money. All of them, Sunderland have invested a degree of money in terms of wages in the time that they've been here. So they'll clearly want to maximise what they can get back for those types of players. Although I'm absolutely, I don't deny that with some, you'd almost just got to write it off and get them out the door. Then we come back to the two looming contract issues of Dan Neil and Dennis Serkin, which still I think will colour a fair degree of what happens in terms of outgoings with Sunderland for the remainder of the summer. Sunderland don't have to sell anyone. We know that. They've had the money for Jack Clark, they've had the money for Tommy Watson, they've had the money for Job. They've clearly got the windfall that you get from going up the Premier League. Their PSR position is strong. It was strong the minute they got promoted. They don't have to sell, but They will not want to be in a position where either Dan Neil or Dennis Serkin can start talking to other clubs in January and move for nothing next summer. They just won't want to be in that. So I still think it's a bit of a watch this space to see how those two contract situations evolve.
I know we alluded to this last week, but in terms of incomings and Sunderland's strategy, it's very different. Clearly, it's bold. It's very different, really, to anything that promoted teams of the last few years have done, isn't it? Now, that's not to say that promoted teams haven't gone out and been bold with signings, but Ipswich, for example, last year, which we touched on last week, just kind of adopted the approach of signing the best players.
Spend a lot of money.
Yeah, but it was the best.
A very different type of player, yeah.
Whereas Sunderland, to get kind of 2 or 3 really eye-catching signings through the door so early, to be so bold in terms of the money they're spending, it's quite a unique case at this stage of the summer, isn't it?
It is, and what it is it's Sunderland backing their judgment, backing the way that they operate, backing the model, the project, whatever you want to call it, backing the type of player that they feel that they can sign, improve, and either make a fundamental part of the first team for years to come or sell on at a profit. Now, if you're signing Eliza Mayenda for, what was it, £500,000, you don't have to improve him that much to be able to make a reasonable amount of money off him. Now, fair play to Sunderland. Mayenda's value at the minute is astronomical compared to what they paid to him. If Eliza Mayenda was to be sold tomorrow, Sunderland would make an absolutely massive profit. They've done brilliantly there. They're going to go some to make a really massive profit off Habib Diarra. I mean, he's going to, they're clearly backing the fact that these players, while they might have hit a certain level already, have the potential to go so much higher. And I think that's the really exciting thing, that if Sunderland have got their judgment right, if their calls turn out to be right, how good might these players, these 21, 22-year-olds who have just started to make a name for themselves in either League One or in Belgium's Jupiler League, how good might they become, might they be? Because Sunderland are clearly backing the fact that they can get better. They can improve. What they're worth now is not what they're going to be worth in a year's time, 2 years' time. Well, that's got to be an exciting prospect, doesn't it, if they're right? And
how fascinating pre-season's going to be. I mean, we joked there about the Gateshead Shields double-header, but we don't know who's going to be involved yet, clearly, and that'll become clear in the next week.
I think with pre-season, it's once we get to the trip to Portugal, isn't it? Once we get to Portugal and the game's over there, and then obviously now that there's a number of games now after they come back with the new couple that have been added to tie things up. So clearly those 3 kind of games in the last just over a week before the start of the season are going to be massive in terms of getting a handle on it. I suspect the Portugal trip will kind of be the first time some of the new arrivals properly are embedded into the first team group. Don't imagine we'll really see Diarra in the friendly games before that. So it's going to be really interesting. And like I say, I think those 2 games away in Portugal and then the matches after that will probably be when we start to get a proper idea of what's the early pecking order look like, where are these players actually going to play, how does Labris see his team looking in the Premier League?
Fascinating times, a fascinating summer and a fascinating season ahead, no doubt. And you can keep up to date with everything by subscribing to We Are Sunderland, which is just £1 for 6 months. And obviously, if you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, all you have to do is click the button below there and you'll get alerted every time we post a video, which is every week. Do get involved with the comments below. We always appreciate that and enjoy looking through those afterwards. So get involved if there's anything you want us to discuss in future vids, and rate and review on the podcast platforms if you prefer to listen to us there. And we'll be back next week on We Are Sunderland, by which time I'm sure there'll be plenty more to talk about, plenty more new names, plenty more twists. Let's see how the next few days play out. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us. Take care.